the Historical Costuming 101 panel. We're your panel! We wanted to start by just kind of introducing ourselves and talking about what brought us to this panel. And just to make things a little fun, if you guys could say what your favorite period is to recreate, that'd be great as well. Start over here.
Okay. I'm Allie. I am a costume designer and technician in the area. I used to work at the Minnesota Opera sewing costumes, and I've been recently just doing design work for my former high school. But I've only recently gotten into historical reenactment, and so I'm really looking forward to recreate costumes how they would have been created historically, because in theater, there are a lot of cheats that you use. And then, I don't know if I have a favorite period to recreate yet, but I'm really looking forward to making late 1700s Rococo gowns and stays. I'm really looking forward to recreating something from there.
I'm Kara. I'm a member of the Living History Society of Minnesota and a history teacher and history teacher educator now. Not in the classroom anymore. Anyway.
You educate?
I educate. I'm like super meta. And I'm super interested in historical practice sewing. So I want to make everything the way that it was made as closely as I can get. I want to make everything using the right textiles and the right fabrics and the right colors and the right patterns, and so it's been a long time. I still haven't finished my first dress. All of the things you'll see today that I'm wearing is mostly borrowed, but there are a few things that I've made. But it's slow going. Hand sewing is so fun, but also really time consuming. It takes a lot of practice. Yes, preach. My favorite period is the 1860s because that's the period that my group reenacts. So that's kind of where I've started. I always loved to teach the Civil War when I was a teacher because I love primary source documents and I love setting out secession declarations in front of students and being like, why did the South secede? And they're all like,
trick question, there's one answer.
And they usually came up with it. Sometimes they didn't though. I think they were just trying to be different. You know how high schoolers are. Anyway, that was always fun for me. And I love controversial history. It's kind of the best thing for me. That's the thing that like gets my blood going about history. So, Civil War, I guess.
Here we are. Hi, I'm Mary, also a historian. I have a background in working at living history museums in Virginia and Illinois and here in Minnesota. And through that, I got into doing a lot of costume work where we would like grow the flax, weave the linen, make the item, replicate the stitch count. And through my work doing that at several living history museums, got into film work. So like Allie, there's a lot of fun cheats that I learned along the way. And yeah, I still do a lot of what I do is recreating for myself, not necessarily as a profession, but I like reinterpreting fantasy costumes or fandom costumes as historical costumes, which to me is like a really fun cognitive exercise of how do you make something work. And if Marjorie Terrell was in the 1920s, what would she be wearing? Which is how I got this.
See it?
Say again?
Can you see it?
Stand up.
Oh.
Stand up.
Do a twirl.
Do a twirl?
There's not room for a twirl.
The most exciting thing was the pocket hoops, where I had to.
Oh,
Nice.
Thank you. just for funsies. And my favorite era to recreate is probably a hard tie between the 1670s, because it's ridiculous, and the 1840s, because I find it deeply romantic and like Jane Eyre. I don't know, it appeals to that side of me. So yeah.
Good morning. My name is Stephanie. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. And I don't so much make historical costuming, historical inspired maybe, but I am a curator with the 3D and textile collection at the Minnesota Historical Society. I work primarily digitizing our fashion collection, so I went through all of our women's fashion hats, and I'm going through our women's fashion collection, which ranges from the stuff I worked on is 1860s to, the most recent thing was a Miss America gown, so it's a pretty wide range. And yeah, getting all that stuff dressed, and so I work with our conservation department and help conserve some of the pieces and getting them up online so people can see them at home and search our collections at home. So that's more my angle to all of this. And I guess in terms of a favorite era, since I don't make the things, I'm actually really partial though to the 19-teens, where it's just getting into no more S-curve, the hats are giant and amazing, and so that's my favorite era to look at, I guess.
Well, at any point, if folks have questions, you can raise your hand and we will call on you.
Ooh, also, pronouns she, her.
She, her. She, her. She, her.
And there will be a question portion at the end, so we can do that.
We want a robust question now. We will also be doing a dress up, if you were wondering why I was sitting here in my underwear. We're gonna do a dress up. But first, we wanted to talk a little bit about spectrum of accuracy. So there's a lot of different ways that different folks think about historical dress. And there's a spectrum of accuracy. And there is no such thing as perfectly accurate, because we aren't in 1822 with the resources that they had available in that context, in that weather, in that moment of cultural context. There's no way that things can be perfectly accurate. So if anybody ever gives you crap about your historical dress and is it's not accurate, you're there's no such things. There are, however, things that are more accurate and things that are less accurate, right? And we use, how many of you are familiar with primary source documents? Oh,
yay! Let's define what a primary source is for the group.
So we, using primary source documents can help us determine whether something is more accurate or less accurate, right?
What are they? You didn't explain.
Oh, would
Those of us
anybody
who
like
did
to
not raise
describe
their
for us what a primary source document is? How do we define
Like a
primary
painting
source?
from the era?
It's been a long time since college, but I'm pretty sure it's coming directly from the person, they wrote it down, they recorded it. It wasn't an observation from outside the period, it was the period itself speaking.
Exactly, and that can include anything from written materials, government documents, buildings,
Receipts.
roadways, receipts,
Diaries are amazing.
hats, clothing, all of that is a primary source.
And then there's the fun part where you get to decide what constitutes a more primary source versus a less primary source, but we won't go there. But there's lots of places to go to find resources to find out what would be more accurate and what would be less accurate. And in the Living History Society, we spend a lot of time being well, I don't know, would they have had this type of belt, or would they, in this year they probably wouldn't have had that kind of sleeve, that would be 2 years later. Really just nitpicky stuff that's, I don't know why I like it so much, but I do. Yeah.
And I think as far as the spectrum of accuracy goes, when it comes to historic costuming, determining what your spectrum of accuracy is, I think is really important. For example, in an educational setting, if you're using recreated clothing to tell history, because clothing is social history, then I would argue aiming for more accurate is probably the way to go, because I'd like to think that everyone wants to educate people to the best of their abilities, but that doesn't have to be the end-all be-all. For what I'm wearing today specifically, there's very little that's actually quote-unquote accurate about this, aside from construction techniques. And for me, since I don't necessarily want to educate anyone about this today, it's totally self-serving. That's what I want. So I think going into historical costuming, determining what your purpose is and what you want to do with it is really, really important in determining your direction and your research.
Yeah. What is your end game? Is it to learn how they would have done things in history? Is it to wear things to learn about how women or men would have lived in these costumes in history? Or like for a theater production, are you just going for the silhouette? Because in a lot of theater, you have to have snaps, zippers. You need zippers because sometimes you have a 30-second quick change and you got to get someone in a costume and out of another one. So what you're going for in that respect is just silhouette. You want the look, but not necessarily the historical accuracy behind it. But in reenactment, you're kind of going for living history. So you have to think about what is your goal in dressing up or creating these costumes.
Yes, absolutely.
Your turn.
One of the things that I find fascinating when I'm working with an actual garment, and I work with the real thing, the actual dress from that period. And I had to learn so much about underwear, like, because part of what I do is dressing the items on a mannequin that would make them look historically accurate. Because looking at it, think about an 1860s dress lying flat. Looks completely different from an 1860s dress on a man. That's why we have to do it. And so we have like a whole rack of petticoats and I can't remember the name, like the elephant trunk thing to hold the bustle. Like there's just
cage?
The lobster bustle
cage. Like we have, you have all of this stuff. So it's never as easy as just get the dress. And I apologize. I approach this from women's fashion because that's more what we have. Men's like fancy fashion, we have stuff, but they're all done already. So I apologize if I don't have as much that I can say. We do have a lot of menswear. But yeah, so you have to know, well, what period is this? Well, if it's, like you said, 2 years later, well, that bustle is not gonna work. And when you put a garment on a mannequin, if you have the wrong bustle, it shows. You can see that the dress doesn't fit right. And so there's always a lot to think about aside from just the dress. I also want to add, when you talk about like historical accuracy, the garments themselves too were hardly ever not altered. I mean, very, very few women throughout history could necessarily buy a dress to wear it just once. And so I've had to really research some dresses that have had some major alterations done because fashion's changed, and it was her favorite dress and she wanted to just change it to match the fashion. So historical accuracy, I mean,
even if you're copying an extant garment, you can't necessarily know that it's original. Like there's so much complication and so much story behind one piece.
And would it be fair to say that many of the garments that survived would have been really incredible and beautiful would have already been custom made and already tailored, so to speak?
That's a great point. A lot of what
No off the rack.
right. And I think Kara can speak to this very passionately about the fancy stuff versus the majority. But when you go to places like the Met, which has, if you wanna waste hours of or spend hours of your day reasonably and and lots of hours, the Met has an incredible costume collection, all accessible online. But a lot of the clothing there was seen as art. And was exceptional, which is why it was saved, or it was worn by someone who history deemed exceptional, which again is loaded with all sorts of problems and biases, and 9 times out of 10 means rich white person. But that doesn't mean that other garments don't exist, or other ways of finding out about what the majority of folks were wearing. There are ways to find that out too.
Yeah, I'm very, very interested in what a person of like who would be like me in the past would be like, and what would their life be like, and I want to make their clothes and wear their clothes to start to think about, well, I guess this is really a lot, but what a main part of my interest in history is to figure out what are the kind of cross-human experiences. What does it mean to be human? And by looking at the past and seeing how things have changed.
It's not even late. We're already like, ooh, diving into that. What does it mean to be human? Sorry. So it's beautiful. No, it's beautiful.
Yeah, because I love cross-cultural study and I love study across time, because those things help me see what the wide spectrum of human experience can be, and then what brings us together as humans.
I can't imagine much survived from common people other
Right,
than
and
what's
that's
in sketches
really
or in
challenging.
books or whatever.
It can be challenging to find. It is there. That's why I turn to history museums more than I turn to art museums, because history museums have a completely different provenance that they use to collect their clothing. So I'm and still there's lots of issues with the way that things have been collected over time and who is represented in those collections and who is not, who is valued in those collections and who is not. So it still can be really challenging to find an accurate or like a full picture of what life was like for people in Minnesota 160 years ago. But that's something that I'd like to continue to work on and to discover and to think about and to reflect about.
So, because you're going right into the History Museum over the Art Museum, may I ask if you have yet seen the couture brief exhibit at the MIA?
Yes.
Our one of our lovely panelists
It was very beautiful.
I did not do that, I want to be clear. I helped with 2 of those dresses, but that was an amazing exhibit. If anybody doesn't know
I
what
have
we're
the
talking
full
about,
thing on my phone.
I forget, the title changed in process like 4 times, so it's Minnesota Couture.
I'm working on it.
Essentially, the idea is more than 4, a few Minnesota dressmakers from the 1880s through 1910. We have the garments that they made, and they're from the Historical Society's collection, and we paired the dress with one of the MIA's paintings from the same time period of a person wearing a similar outfit, not like the exact costume, but so you can kind of see them in context. And there's the fancy dresses, but there's also some menswear. There's some of the underpinnings, like the original cage bustles and everything. So it is a really fascinating exhibit that several of my coworkers worked very hard on, and I watched.
It was such a fun surprise walk in the MIA.
It was amazing. I'd walk into the conservation lab at the Historical Society and be like, oh.
My favorite piece in it is a bodice that's laid open so you can see the inside and see all the seams. And
Yes.
love construction details.
I see a floor question.
Yes. So correct me if I'm wrong, but when it comes to common people, that's kind of where the secondary sources come in. Like we have a drawing of, not a corset,
stays.
Starts with an S.
Stays.
Stays, thank you. Stays from the 1700s. So we don't have the actual clothing, which would be a primary, but we have a drawing. Would you consider that accurate enough? Or?
Yeah, there's a lot of, I brought actually a copy of the Godey's Ladies book, which lots of fashion plates and magazines that were very popular and in wide circulation at the time can be excellent primary sources to draw from, to see what other women were looking at and kind of using as inspiration. Some of those things can be helpful too.
And we live in a glorious age where there's so many resources thanks to the internet. Google Books has lots of Godey's Ladies books. Was there one called Peterson's or Peterson? Okay, Peterson's as well, where they'll actually have like knitting instructions to make knitted garters or things like that. Where all of that does some of that does exist. One of my favorite primary sources that was used, or that I've seen used in different capacities, is fabric samples. Sample books are so much fun to look through, especially from what I think is interesting, the mid-19th century, the 1840s, because it really can show you the range of what fabrics were out there. Some of which I find really surprising, where there's like ombre, blue and orange printed cotton fabric, and you see it and you're like, oh God, who wore this? And then it's like, oh God, someone wore this.
My ball gown fabric is bright orange and turquoise.
And it's really fun because it can dispel looking at those, even, those little pieces of fabric that people could look through at the store and like, I want a bolt of this. It can not only dispel some myths about different time periods, but also can provide a great starting point for creating a historical garment and looking through your local fabric store or S.R. Harris, which has an amazing cotton print collection, and finding something that approximates that.
Yeah, there's go ahead.
Like finding some fabric that you fall deeply in love with and you kind of go, it's close enough, right? This is good.
Spectrum of accuracy.
This is good. I'm calling it good.
It's beautiful. Love that pink.
I also love thinking about looking at the actual costumes. They had much different ideas of what clashing meant. Like it didn't exist, basically. And so you'll see like just flamingo pink costumes with peacock blue trimmings and like weird stuff that now it's like, whoa. But when you were wearing things in gaslight, then it would have looked much more appropriate, or maybe still was much, but they didn't care. Or I especially love learning about age. So we have a concert dress from a Bucer concert dress from the 1920s that was worn. It's this adorable floral, probably like calf length, and it was worn by a 75-year-old woman because she saw it in the store and she wanted to wear it. And you look at it and most people assume that's a young woman's dress. But the concept of, oh, you're too old to wear that doesn't really factor into a lot of these garments. And so you'd see young women wearing lots of black lace and women of an older age, wearing like floral pastels and like bows, and it's amazing.
Something you brought up earlier that I think is really important as well when doing research and looking at primary sources is context. And I think doing wide-ranging research to give context to the garment that you're creating, I think is really important, because things like if you're trying to recreate the clothing of a middling woman from the 1850s in Minnesota.
Teacher.
Yeah.
Well, former teacher, now married, can't work anymore. So that's the rules.
Yeah.
As it should be.
That understanding that context can help you understand the things that they were wearing. Just like today, I cannot wear this to my workplace, very sadly. But if you looked at my closet, I mean, I don't know how long I'd work there.
Slowly but surely.
It would become a forum. We all work at the same place.
Except for me.
Join us. But understanding that context, I think, is really really important and can be really exciting and fun, where you're looking at garments, you're looking at paintings, you're looking at photographs, and that's what sort of reminded me of this is like wild colors. I feel like there's this pretty common perception that things in the 1840s, 50s, and 60s, like Civil War time, were super drab. Which by and large wasn't necessarily the case, but I think a lot of that perception comes from photographs of the era, which are a great resource, but they don't show color.
The restoration of Mount Vernon, chartreuse.
Yeah. Monticello has like bright yellow walls.
And Victorian homes.
Yeah.
The ones that have survived have all been painted white or gray or something more, but yeah, you see the original colors and wow.
And there's colors.
That's also a really big problem in the classical era, because you have all these marble statues that would have been painted and people really were garish colors. But all we see is white.
That's all that's left.
That's a great point. I remember reading an article about, that's not my area of expertise, area and era, I guess. Yeah. I'm a comedian. But yeah, that's a great point where I'm, was also surprised to see that, and understanding that context is fascinating and important.
One of the things that I think is really exciting about the study of history is that it's always changing, and new research is always being done, and primary sources are being discovered, rediscovered, or found, or unearthed from the depths of a collection, or reinterpreted. So things are always changing, and so I think one of the cool things, and that's what's exciting about it, is that I'm always going to be able to learn something new. Even if I stuck in the same period for my whole life, I'd still be able to learn new things. It's not like you master it and then you're accurate and then you're done.
And we proudly call that revisionist history.
I was gonna go back to alterations of the era. How, especially women, probably in more of the working class, they would take older clothes and change them to new styles. And I kind of wanted to bring up something that I hadn't thought about when I was creating my costume, which was, I want to show you.
Yeah. Take a look.
If I can get my top.
Oh, is this?
Yes.
I'm so excited about this.
Okay.
Wait, can I share the thing that I shared with you?
I don't know what's happening.
I
It's
have.
one of these
I have a 10-month-old child, and I am a nursing mother. So when I went in to make my corset, I was like, I need to be able to feed him, and I can't completely disrobe every time that happens. So what they did, I had to research nursing corsets.
Can I see?
So it is a patch over the breast, and it buttons on either side with just a little thread loop. So I can untie this, flap it down, flap it back up, and it still functions as a normal corset. And I believe most women of the era would have just taken an old corset, cut it out, and patched patches back in. There wasn't a patent for this until almost 1880. There was one minor one in the 1870s, but prior to that, women mostly made them themselves, as far as I found in research.
That's super cool.
So I was able to make mine fully from scratch. I didn't have to take an old one and redo it, but.
We don't wear corsets every day?
Oh, well, as much as I would love that.
What boning did you use for that corset?
I used steel flat
Okay, so
boning.
how did you work around the cups then?
So the boning only goes up to under the bust, and then I used cording to stiffen the flaps.
Also, it's almost like a Regency.
Yeah,
Or
or
cording throughout the
early
period.
Victorian. They did a lot of cording. I want to say in the 1840s and 50s too.
1840s, you see oodles of cording.
Yeah. So it was my inspiration. I did actually find an example of a nursing corset, and I went ahead and kind of copied a similar design.
There's when we were talking about this before, when we were prepping for this panel, one of my like many internet rabbit holes that I went down years ago through Pinterest actually, which is a great resource because not only can you save things, but you can trace where they're from. So it has,
that's important.
so you know where you're getting the information. And therefore can either verify it as reliable or not reliable. But there are like lovely and really like moving collections of women nursing, like photographs of women breastfeeding from the 1840s through the 1860s, and it's really lovely. I feel like it says, like, the nursing corset placed in context with that paints a really lovely picture about motherhood and society at the time, where someone felt that it was so important to capture this moment that they took a picture of it, which was not necessarily the most inexpensive thing to do. And did it shamelessly, shamelessly, like where it was a...
It's not shameful, yeah. It's like, they thought it was important enough to take a photograph of, and in that period that would be quite a to-do. Do we want to do, are the panelists at a place where we could maybe do a little dress up?
Do I need to stand?
No.
Okay.
You can stay up
If you
here.
didn't see me get on
I don't
the
honestly need any
stage,
help.
it's an ordeal.
You don't need me. I don't need it. I can do it myself. Okay.
You let me know if you need any help. I will let you out.
This is my hair extension. Wow. I don't actually have hair this long. But in the period, people would generally try to grow their hair as long as possible.
I know people with hair that long today.
Okay.
I know.
And people would also
my hair does not grow this long.
at the while you're standing.
Yes, I will do
At
that,
the
please.
Historical Society, we have the hair receivers. So women would brush their hair, and then they pull out all that hair and they put it in these little jars. And there
I
were
have one of
two
those.
main uses for that. Number one is you'd make a wrap. So you take that bundle of your own hair, you tease it all together into one big lump, and then that's what you'd use to make your hair bigger, because it was your own hair color. The other thing you could do is make jewelry. And hair jewelry is not jewelry for your hair. It is made from hair. And the thing is, it can be the most beautiful, delicate looking jewelry that you'll see. There's bracelets and brooches and everything, and there's whole wreaths of it, and they still have the original hair color, and it creeps me out. Can I share another going too deep with hair story? A friend of mine, I don't know how this happened, but a friend of mine who does living history recreationally, her grandmother had cut off some of her hair, like along several braids of it, and had saved it for God knows what reason. And now my friend wears that hair to pad out her hair, which is it's an accurate thing, but also it's like, oh. Was there a question down here?
Oh, I was just gonna say that they do hair wreaths too, and I have my great-grandmother's hair wreath.
Yeah, you'd make decorative framed wreaths that you'd put on your wall. And it is very clearly hair.
Well, there is a hair museum.
Yeah, it's a hair wreath museum. I think it's in the
it's beautiful, but interesting.
Yeah.
There's also, for more context for things like hair jewelry, recently, if you are a follower of Antiques Roadshow, there was, I think it was it was not Emily Bronte's hair. Whose hair was that? Do you know?
No, I don't know. I didn't.
Okay, but someone, a famous authoress, it's not Emily Bronte, but that's the name that's coming to my mind. It's not accurate. But they found a mourning, M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G, mourning bracelet that had a lock of her hair in it, and they discovered that it had accurate provenance and could
They
be
can clone her in the future.
exactly the point.
Dinosaurs first.
So just pin my hair up. Oh, hey.
I was gonna say, for you guys that sew, for people who are common and didn't do fancy hair, my great-grandmother and my grandmother used their hair to make their pin cushions because the oils in the hair keep the needles sharper and
Really?
I wanted to know
I'm in too deep. I'm like, I can do that.
It's like, ooh, next time I take all the goop out of my brush.
I always
save
say
it.
Be careful Googling.
Be careful.
Okay.
So this is a chemise. I made this from white cotton, some little lacy bits. Decoration and lace not needed. It's fun, but this is a practical garment. It's gonna get dirty. It's gonna get washed a lot. So, in a lot of ways, you don't need to waste good lace on an undergarment. I did anyway because I wanted to.
Was there a preference on cotton broadcloth versus linen?
I think by the
You go
Please?
first.
No, you're
go.
the textile expert. You answer that question.
So it depends on the era. So by the mid 19th century, what we're showing here, like a cotton muslin was just like one-to-one easy cheap weave was the most common. But cotton didn't become inexpensive until the early 19th century. So before that, it likely would have been linen, which was a common fabric at the time. You also see a lot of really exciting blends of fibers, which is. Are you also excited about fiber blends? Let me tell you about a time where I found a photograph of a woman from the 1860s. She had this super cool woven 2x2 a basket weave fabric. And it looked shiny-ish. I was like, oh, what the hell is this thing? What is this fabric? I can't tell. And then I found in a collection, a recreation of a silk wool blend that was in a basket weave where I was just like, yes. Weird combinations. But you see a lot of that in the historically fabrics back in the day tended to be way nicer than fabrics that we can access today.
Yeah. I have. Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna ask, temperature-wise, I was told I could break accuracy, for breathability. So would you say cotton or linen in terms of just so I won't die in party rooms?
I vote cotton, honestly. That's usually my go-to.
I think it depends on how heavy the weave is.
Yeah.
I'm all cotton right now, and I'm still roasting.
But definitely not polyester fibers, because those don't breathe at all.
The reason I ask is for the Renaissance Festival, we do linen because we're wearing the upholstery fabric on our outer fashion garbs.
And there's some I've seen some.
Cotton would have been common then. Probably.
Yeah, it was linen was supposedly more common. I dressed for about the 1580s. And linen also supposedly, I've heard, wicks the moisture away from your body, so it keeps you cooler than actually.
This guy is really excited about that.
Yeah. Well, linen and wool actually will do that.
Yeah.
Wool is
Wool is actually fantastic for that.
And that's another thing that I find really exciting is that there's historically you can find sheer weight wools where it's it's a lightweight wool. Just because it's wool doesn't mean it's coat material. And it's really hard to find.
Stockings.
Oh, nice. Fashionfabricsclub.com.
Yep.
If anyone is looking for fabrics.
Yes.
She's just standing.
I know.
Yeah. I just want everyone to appreciate Kara's.
Should I walk around and show you my French seams?
We also want to. I also did. We also want to have.
I want to know how you
Yes, we should.
Are you using garters?
Yes.
No, I'm not. These are not wholly accurate. They're knit cotton, but they've got a little spandex in them.
Okay.
She is thou art accurate. Okay. My monocle.
Burn her!
It's hard to find. It's just hard to find all cotton stockings. It's just real hard to find. These are replica boots from, what's that place called?
Fugaway. Fugawee.
And they've got little elastic inserts in them, so even them are, cutting some corners here, I'll tell you more. But they're really pretty, and I want to wear them every day. Actually, I'm not going to put those on yet. The next level is, well, a lot of people want to know when you're in a big hoop skirt like that, how do you go to the bathroom? How do people pee? And often, if you wore drawers at all, which a lot of women just didn't, because honestly, it is kind of annoying. But I need it, for the thigh chafage part. Anyway, these are split crotch drawers. They just have a big giant hole in the middle. And you can't, today's toilets are not built for cage crinolines. So you kind of have to sidle on it backwards and then just hope that you've got everything out of the way. And I will freely admit that I have soiled these drawers accidentally.
We should get
panel you guys showed up for, right?
Next year's panel will have ribbons soiled my drawers.
No, it's the modern like porta-privies.
Yeah, because you would honestly, most women would use like a little like chamber pot and just be like, do 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 do. I'm done.
What would they be like, Kara?
That was the one time.
This should have been like at 10:30 p.m.
You can always just come hang out with us later.
At Nerd last night, I was like, someone should do a historically accurate burlesque.
There are so many. You can go down the Instagram rabbit hole of historically accurate like burlesque dancers, and it's like their work is amazing.
Peace, guys, I gotta go.
Found to leave.
All right, so this is the corset. This is also not accurate. Well, not super accurate. It's a cotton twill, but this color most people in a store in 1860 wouldn't choose this because it looks kind of dirty, right? A lot of times people will look at extant garments and things and look at them and they're faded, right? Or they are like this color and they're like, oh, cool. I'll pick fabric that looks like that. Looks aged, but in the period, people would not have chosen that. They would have chosen fresh white. Mm-hmm. And so white, that was my bad. This was the first fabric I thought.
I'd say so. And white was inexpensive, so
yes,
a lot of folks price needed to be factored in, where some fabric dyes are more expensive than others. And Kara, before we came down here, brought up when doing film costuming, one thing that we did, that's like the three things that we had to make sure that would get an accurate look, because it was all historical film costuming, was foundations, like what you're wearing now, what you wear underneath everything can change the look of a garment, and then fit of the garment, so it's fitted accurately to you, and then what we would say frippery or frills. If the frills if you have like a beautiful bonnet, and let's say that instead of being lovely and wonderful, there was like metallic polyester lace, it would throw off the look in a way that's really noticeable.
I feel like I see in a lot of historical dramas bonnets that don't have any decoration on them at all. And I'm always like, I don't know, somebody tell me what my opinion should be on this.
I lean towards more. More is more.
So did you make this corset?
I did. I made this corset. It's got flat steel boning in, and it's fitted to me, and it's actually really comfortable, you guys. I've gone whole days at events with this. It's not scary. It doesn't hurt. It feels fine.
Tight lacing wasn't common.
Not at all. Yeah. You have to have a lot of money and a lot of time to do nothing because you couldn't breathe.
This is like the 1860s sports bra.
I would basically just when I memeasure my waist before and after, I'll lose maybe an inch. Not much. Yeah. And it's mostly just this right here getting pushed down.
I have back problems, and a corset is just the tits for that.
Awesome. All right, that's the next ribbon. Corsets are the tits.
Nice. This is my cage crinoline. I got it for free from somebody leaving the hobby. So it doesn't fit me at all. It's really big. But whatever.
What are the spines?
Steel.
Okay.
It's all steel. All steel. No baleen here.
Yeah, baleen was not terribly popular by the 19th century.
Mm-hmm. And there's synthetic baleen, like whalebone is baleen, right? And there's synthetic baleen that you can get that behaves very similarly, which I feel like it would be okay even though it's made of plastic and that wasn't technically around, but if you were making a garment that used baleen, it would be, I think, the best way to do it rather than do it with steel.
An appropriate choice because you can never be 100% accurate.
Exactly, I have elastic in my boots.
So a cool comparison, so these are also hoops from they're replicating 1920s ones that are made with not reed, but wood.
Yeah.
Like I got cheapo basket weave, and do something similar where it supports the garment, but is made out of a different material with a different look, manipulated in a different way.
Yes. You can actually get real baleen, but it's extremely difficult. And it's sketchy.
Why would you have the corseting opening at the front of the cage there? I'm just curious.
This?
Yes.
Yeah, how would you adjust with that
This is for my butt. Smooth my butt. So I assume that this goes in the front. And no one in Living History Society has told me that I shouldn't, so I'm going on that. Yeah.
And the other thing too with, especially with costuming, if my rule is that if no one's going to see it, then who, you know.
Do you have any idea why it was even all that lace up the front? Like, what's the?
I'm not sure. I haven't asked that question, so I can't give you a confirmed answer, but if anybody can, please just chime in. Right? Gentlemen?
Would it be, like I said, the garments were Jared and Bell, for example, like wouldn't that be?
Yeah, this helps to adjust to the body, right? So if I have a baby, that would be helpful.
Okay. So they wore corsets up until like almost the very last, month of labor. So you would just loosen the bottom of the corset and then.
Yeah, and then sometimes they put laces in the sides to expand for,
And
they would hike up
some
the
shaping as well. I thought I saw something, with the lacing in different places where you can shape the corset to.
We are doing historical inquiry right now. All we need is some primary sources. We'll really get going.
Mythbusters.
I guess my question would be why the flat ridge bottom as opposed to the tabs on the corset?
The flat, I'm sorry, what?
The smooth bottom to the corset as opposed to doing more like the Elizabethan tab.
Oh, that's a great question.
Could you translate that to English too?
So they're on older, what in the Elizabethan era, I think people would usually refer to as bodies, and then in stays from the 17th, 18th centuries, they would have, the fit was different.
Yeah, they would end it here, and then they would have flaps instead of it going over the hip.
Because you wanted it was a different silhouette.
Yeah.
So, that's much more focused on kind of the waist, whereas the stays are much more kind of
give you
cone
more
shaped with big hips.
Yeah, and there's a lot of similarities between those because you do have I was going to be like, maybe it's because there's a lot of weight in this cage crinoline, and I was like, no, they're not very heavy.
I think, Victoria, it's just it's a much smoother silhouette, whereas with stays, it was a little bit more jarring. It went down, and then the hips went out.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, and on the shorter stays, you had those tabs to help disperse the weight of the cage around your hips so that the pressure points had some relief.
Yeah.
And some of that too was not just, it was more for the fabric than anything else, which I think Stephanie can speak a lot to with like supporting fabric nowadays and like wear points. That you can see in some historic ethnic garments?
Yeah, if a garment is in good enough condition, we still hang it because that's where the weight is meant to be. And frankly, it takes up so much less space. Space is a big deal in a museum because of, your building can't grow. And so obviously there's a lot of garments we store in drawers because they are not in a good enough condition where they can be hung up. But especially if it's a women's dress, the garment is meant to be hanging from the shoulder. So it's going to be supported here if it was made at all well. And so if the fabric has held out, then we still try to hang things wherever possible.
I think there's a lot of questions that I would love to answer that I can't answer for sure, right? Because I can wear the thing that I've created that's as accurate as I could manage to figure out based on my research, and I can wear it and kind of make some deductions. But unless I can find people talking about it, and different people are going to have different opinions about why we're doing this or that, right? And a lot of the books. There's a lot of books written by men about women's clothing.
We know everything.
And nobody wants to talk about underwear. So, I mean, obviously these are great questions, and these are one of the things and the reasons why we do this, because we want to know, we want to learn more, and we really want to have some of that intimate connection with people of the past to figure out what's going on and why.
Now, I had a costume design teacher who would say it all comes down to shoes and underwear, because that is how you get your silhouette. Also, if you have a costume and you have like the wrong shoes, people are gonna nitpick it. Like when I made Princess Leia. And I could not get my boots finished in time, and I literally wore a pair of Uggs with my slave Leia costume. This was ages ago. Everybody picked on my boots. Everybody picked on my boots. Which I think brings up a good thing. If you're not 100% accurate and you see someone who's not 100% accurate, don't nitpick it.
It's a journey.
They probably already know.
That's a big issue in some reenactor communities.
Oh boy, is it.
I think it goes back to that thing of just everyone be nice. Everyone be nice to each other. I think we got to keep rolling along.
I have a little sort of a question.
I read that in the school era, sheer blouses were a thing.
In the 1860s?
Yeah.
I mean, some of them were, like, there was a lot of sheer, you can find a lot of sheer
pretty popular for the summer.
How much, I don't know how sheer they are, like, what would you be able, like, you just see it?
You'd have a chemisette, so you'd have like a little blouse that goes over your chemise and over your corset that's kind of like obscures it. Some shears have built-in liners that kind
That's what I have. I have a it's floating kind of in here. It's attached at the shoulder seams and that's it. But it's like a floating bodice underneath this. It also helps with the structure because the front of my bodice is ruched at the bottom and pleated at the top. But my bodice underneath is fitted with just a dart.
So is it like a partlet then?
I don't know what you would call it. I actually, and I'm going to plug these books, the Janet Arnold book series are fantastic. I used a lot of that for my inspiration and notes when kind of working on this dress. And that's what it was. It was a floating lining underneath.
Kind of a two-part sort of question comment.
Okay.
I do theater costuming, and I recently, this last year, I made a hoop. It was very more simple. It was an external sort of whatever. But anyway, two things was I had a really hard time finding the materials to do it. You know, the metal, I ended up using a different kind of, whatever you want to call it, the boning or whatever you want to call it. Didn't turn out that great. And then once I found some materials, just doing the construction, like, okay, I see pictures, but how do I actually construct this?
There is a Needle and Thread is a store at Gettysburg, and they make hoops. One of the things they do is they make hoops and they sell hoop kits, and they have like detailed instructions on how to make them that they send to you and how to make them. They are, as far as I understand, the most accurate thing you can find to help. There used to be a company that would make the type of boning you would need for hoops. They don't make it anymore, they're gone, so it's really difficult. It's really challenging.
It's really hard. Yeah.
Was it a hoop skirt meant to be seen that you were designing for?
It was sort of an avant-garde external hoop. It actually turned out okay. I think it turned out pretty good. But yeah, and then like the construction part, just knowing how, okay, I have these materials, how do I do it? Because I've scoured YouTube to try to find, and you get people using hula hoops and things like that, which is fine for theater, and it can be fine for reproductions, but when you're trying to do something a little bit more accurate, you know.
Yeah.
Plus you get the rattle.
There's a ton of really great resources that we wanted to share with you, but we didn't get a document together in time. But I'm wondering, what was our badge going to be? What was our badge ribbon going to be?
Courses to the tits. And the first one was I soiled my drawers.
I soiled my drawers. Corsets are the tits. Let's go with that one. Hashtag corsets are the tits. And we'll just post some things out on, what's your favorite social media?
We can post it on the CONvergence, the CONvergence Facebook page.
Yeah.
Oh, which one? There's 3.
All of them? Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, hashtag corsets are the tits. That's our hashtag now. Here I am. I have my cotton day dress on. I only have one petticoat on because it's hot as hell in here. And also I don't have another one. This is fun. This is a little patch that we did because this is a dress I borrowed from the closet. It is not mine. It's not made for me. That's why it's ill-fitting. And here's a bonnet. It's got silk on it. It's flowers, more is more. And I have to have a collar, some cuffs to kind of move things, make things presentable. So there's just attached collars and cuffs.
It would also protect the garment.
Yeah, from my sweat, which is happening.
So the cuffs are detachable?
Yes. Yes, so I have to replace these. These are actually yellowing, so I need to replace them.
And that's not unique to this time period. This is all the way up through, I know of several 1950s, maids' uniforms. They'd always be detachable because if the uniform was black and the cuffs were white, you take them off so you could bleach them, starch them, and then just reattach them.
Yeah. If you have collars that are going on your shirts, you can take them off and replace them. You could. It's possible. I have a plastic belt because I don't have a real belt yet.
I was going to say, would they have used anything to hang from the belt or external pockets or anything like that?
No.
Okay.
Maybe I'll have a little drawstring bag.
Okay.
I think that's more common in Elizabethan, 16th century backwards. They're called chatelaines, right? Sweet. So we are at about 5 minutes.
So we could take questions.
Yeah, so I know we can kind of do questions as we go, but if you
I have
have
a question down here.
Okay.
I was just wondering how she sat down without squishing anything.
Or flashing us.
I'm a lady. Don't cross your legs. Ankles only. Back? Yeah.
Well, I keep reading about how dresses and shirts were turned. What the hell does that mean?
Turned?
Can you use? Oh, please. Yes.
You can do this because you can do this like men's collars and such. If you take the collar off, turn it around, put it back on. That piece of the collar that had been up and got frayed, you turn around and it's the underside.
Clever.
And so when they would have a part like collars or cuffs or things, you turn it and use the other side, which is not worn.
That explains like a mattress.
Yeah, it's very different from a modern college. Right. That's what the turning is.
Okay.
Okay. We learned something.
Other questions?
History.
I know everybody is well, context, if you have a specific occurrence, specific time frame, but if you, and that's great if you have a specific item, but if you're kind of trying to be, no general timeline of side panniers, that would be 17th century, or knowing kind of when sumptuary laws may have started to fade, and, is there general resources that you would trust to have more of timeline overall?
Janet Arnold, I think, would be great.
One thing I use a lot, and the work I do, goes back to 1850s, because before that clothes, they didn't really survive very much. But a resource I use a lot is, I pulled it up, Vintage Fashion Guild. It's a website, but they have hat section, they have a vintage fashion label resource, so you can search labels, and they have photos of the exact so it's really helpful for dating things. And they have several different timeline things, and I use that a lot for work in terms of trying to figure out a date on a garment.
Can you say the name again, please?
So the main spot, it's just Vintage Fashion Guild.
VintageFashionGuild.com.
.org.
Oh, okay.
But they've got several helpful
Janet Arnold.
Okay. Janet Arnold books. I love them.
Are there folks who haven't had a chance to ask a question yet who would like to ask a question?
I will say, in terms of making garments, clearly I don't make historically accurate, but if you're going for the whole close enough, McCall's cosplay blog is amazing. They've started making, McCall's like pattern company started making their own line of like cosplay fashion, and they have a blog that they talk about. There's like a 2-part section on boning that taught me a whole bunch of stuff.
Boning.
They talk about
Third ribbon.
They talk about like how to actually make a bodysuit, which if you've never made a full like a bodysuit, it's hard. They have actually a lot of really helpful how-tos that I find amazing. So.
I was just gonna say, because there's a bunch of people knitting back here, and maybe think that Ravelry has done a really good job of, people have uploaded scans of historical knitting patterns, and if you use the filtered search, you can filter by date and sort by date, so you can get the ones specifically for the era you're looking for. But you have to be really careful because needle sizes change, especially if it's a British publication that's of a certain age.
Yeah.
So you have to like translate to modern knitting.
And I know that that was a big conversation a couple of years back in the Civil War reenacting communities, how you hold your needles. Is it the American way or the British way?
Yes.
And people got into like fights about it. All right.
McCall's has a hoop skirt pattern out right now.
Nice.
Nice.
I've been getting the wave of the it's time.
Yep. So I was wondering, for more common folk, was it difficult to get the steel or?
Steel is pretty cheap.
And you could buy somebody's old corset and get their stuff and just use it again. You know, like there's a lot of different options and lots of
Repurposing is very
folks. You can buy
popular.
used clothes, and then so maybe even if I'm just a middle class person, I can still have a silk dress because I can buy a silk dress, alter it, and make it my own.
So I think we have to clear out, but if you, the 4 of us are pretty noticeable. So feel free to come up and ask us anything.
No, that